Hi, this is Mike from BandLab. With BandLab's included instruments and effects, you can make any kind of music you like. In this video, we'll show you how to make a jungle beat with chopped breakbeats, heavy bass, and atmospheric pads. You can open this project yourself with the link in the video description. And if you find this guide useful, please hit the subscribe button and the notification bell to be the first to know when new videos drop. I start by setting the project tempo to 155 beats per minute, and the project key to D minor. The first element I'm going to add is a breakbeat. I open BandLab's sounds and enter jungle into the text search field. I open the 90s jungle pack and set the instrument filter to drum. I like the sound of J155 Break Sovereign 4-bar. I'd like to chop this breakbeat up and sequence it with MIDI, so I create a sampler track and drag the sample onto the first pad. I move the sample end marker to the end of the first bar, so that when the pad is played, it only plays for one bar. I then duplicate the sample onto the second sample pad. To duplicate samples, hold Option on Mac or Alt on Windows and drag them over. I move the sample start marker to the first snare. I duplicate the pad out again, and this time move the sample start marker to the beginning of the hi-hat section. Now I have pads for kick, snare, and hi-hats. This means I can program my own chopped up version of the breakbeat. I set this track to +3 dB to make it louder. I then program in a 4-bar pattern. This pattern always has a kick on the first beat of the bar and a snare on the second beat of the bar to give it a consistent groove. I want to layer this with another breakbeat. Rather than chop this one up in a sampler, I'm just going to put it onto an audio track. I drag J155 Break Heli 4-bar onto an audio track. I truncate this to 2 bars in length and duplicate it out. To duplicate clips in BandLab, hold Option on Mac or Alt on Windows and drag them over. I set this track to -6 dB to balance it with the main breakbeat. These breaks complement each other nicely, so now I want to add some music. I add a new virtual instrument track and set it to Pads, Atmosphere Pad. I set this track to -3 dB. I program in a simple part that plays D, C, and D. I want to make sure I have plenty of room for bass in the mix. So in the effects panel, I add a tone multi-filter effect, putting it in high pass mode and setting the frequency to 350 Hz. I then add a delay, ping pong delay. I set the mix to 50%. I also add a reverb, studio reverb. The delay and reverb give the sound a more atmospheric feel. Now I want to add a bass line. I create another virtual instrument track and set it to 808's 808 bass. I set this track to -3 dB. I sequence a bass line that plays D, C, and G. Now I'd like to add a melodic element. I create a virtual instrument track and set it to Keyboards, Bright Piano. I program in a simple melody that plays D, F, C, D. Again, I add a ping pong delay, setting the mix to 50%. I also add a studio reverb. I want to add another sound to create a call and response motif, and to do this, I'm going to use another breakbeat rather than a traditional pitched instrument. I create another sampler track and drag J165 Amen Chop 8-bar onto the first pad. I move the start and end markers around the first isolated snare. I then duplicate this pad and set the pitch of the new pad to +1 semitone. I sequence this to play a simple pattern that complements the piano melody. I add a studio reverb, setting the mix to 28% and the size to 15%. Next, I want to create a B section. I duplicate the existing 4-bar loop. I delete the pad and 808 bass sections and add a new instrument track. I set this to synth basses, smooth Reese. I set this track to -6 dB. I program in a simple legato bass line that plays D, A, and G. I'd like to make this Reese sound yet smoother, so I add a multi-filter and set the frequency to 100 Hz. As well as the new bass line, I'd like to vary the piano and snare too. I edit the piano to play D, C, F, C. I changed the snare too, this time adding some notes with a lower velocity of 64 to add some dynamic interest. I'd like this to vary the second time it's played, so I duplicate these 4 bars out and replace the second snare clip with the original snare clip from the first section. Now I'd like some transitional effects to help me make an arrangement. In BandLab's Sounds, I return to the main page, and this time search for Dub Siren. I open the Dub Siren Effects pack and drag MT Dub Siren FX02 onto an audio track. I set this track to -9 dB. I add a ping pong delay, setting the mix to 50%. I then drag MT Dub Siren FX01 onto an audio track. I set this track to -9 dB. Again, I add a ping pong delay, setting the mix to 50%. Now I have all the elements I need to create an arrangement. The arrangement begins with the Heli breakbeat in the pad. On bar 17, the piano and snare comes in. The Heli breakbeat takes a 2-bar break before the drop, which emphasizes the drop's impact. On the drop, the 808 bass and main breakbeat are added, and the pad and piano leave the mix. On bar 49, we switch up to the B section, where the piano returns and we swap to the Reese bass. On bar 65, we swap the piano for the pad, and return to the 808 bass. Remember, you can fork this project and make your own version of it using the link in the video description. Have fun!